The Steelers' offense has been sputtering. The Cardinals can't stay out of the headlines. And speaking of headlines, yet another one in the Deshaun Watson saga has been written. I'm Joe Dolan, and this is the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup for Thursday, August 4th, 2022.
It's time for the FantasyPoints.com Daily Lineup. Staying on top of the latest news and updates around the NFL. Rise and shine, folks. We're taking the field. Here's your host, FantasyPoints.com's Joe Dolan.
Starting at quarterback today, but maybe not for long, is Pittsburgh's Mitchell Trubisky. Now, according to the Athletic's Mark Kaboly, the Steelers have dubbed their starting quarterback job a three-way battle among, not between, I know you're watching, Mom, among Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and rookie Kenny Pickett. But things have not been pretty so far. While the Steelers have allocated most of their first-team reps to Trubisky, indicating they want him to win the job, or at least from the outset, you wonder if things will change soon. Under Mike Tomlin, the Steelers have run a drill they call 7 shots. This is like their most popular drill in training camp. It's a goal line drill pitting the offense against the defense, and it's simple. If the offense gets in the end zone, it gets a point. If not, the defense gets a point. And whoever's ahead after 7 shots at the end zone, hence 7 shots, wins. Now, prior to Wednesday, Trubisky had been on an 0 for 16 stretch in the drill. He snapped the streak, but per Kaboly, he's 4 for 23 overall in the drill and has thrown the most interceptions of all quarterbacks in camp. But, as Kaboly points out, and it's very fair to point out, he's also doing it without Najee Harris, Chase Claypool, and Pat Freiermuth. Try to say that 3 times fast. All of whom are battling minor injuries. And Trubisky is also without Deontay Johnson. More on that later. Kaboly noted that the reps behind Trubisky have been split pretty evenly. Both of Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph have also gotten some first-team reps. Kaboly observed that Pickett kind of looks like a one-read guy so far, which isn't uncommon for a rookie, and we shouldn't panic. But the fact that Trubisky isn't pulling away, the fact that Mason Rudolph is also getting first-team reps, and let's be honest, if Mason Rudolph wins this competition, well, that would be bad. Hashtag analysis. Now, let's move to running back. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's Seasonson. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I had my friend Andrew Callahan from the Boston Herald on the Franchise Focus podcast at Fantasy Points. And one of Callahan's hot takes, I guess if that's what you want to call it, is that he expected second-year Patriots running back Rhamondre Stevenson to take over the Patriots backfield in some way in 2022. Now, that doesn't mean he'll be the Patriots' bell cow back. That's something the Patriots have almost never had under Bill Belichick, really, since Corey Dillon in 2004 when he ran for about 1,600 yards. But following up with Callahan last night, I got more of the inside scoop on Stevenson. Now, he was held back in training camp the past 2 days with an undisclosed ding and dent, but from a distance, according to Callahan, Stevenson seems okay. Before that, he led the team in catches during team periods. He's also been taking all of what would be James White snaps in passing drills and looks like a more natural pass catcher than Damian Harris. Now, Stevenson was riding the bike again on Wednesday on the side, so it looks like the Patriots are managing something minor, but it's nothing to worry about, Callahan says. Now, why is Stevenson getting all of James White's reps? Well, our Dr. Edwin Porras at Fantasy Points isn't convinced James White is ever going to play again with his hip injury, which is similar to the injury that ended Ryan Fitzpatrick's career. And ESPN's Mike Reese said a few weeks ago that White had, quote, an uncomfortable gait. Moreover, rookie Pierre Strong, ostensibly who the Patriots drafted to replace James White in the future, is also dealing with an undisclosed injury. Now, Damian Harris scored 15 touchdowns last year. He's not going away. But those receptions, those third down passing downs, those are the calorie-rich touches for fantasy. And the steady drumbeat for Stevenson handling those has been banging. And his ADP has risen slowly. But even though his ADP has risen slowly, I'm still buying him at his 8th, 9th round ADP on Underdog Fantasy. It took me a while to decide to actually put this in the daily lineup because I didn't want our producer, Ben Kukanis, to get too excited. But at our other running back spot, we head to Kansas City. And I promise I'm not doing this for Kukanis and Scott Barrett. But Chiefs rookie running back Isiah Pacheco will enter the preseason as Kansas City's top kick returner, Nate Taylor of The Athletic reports. Now, this is not surprising because Pacheco had 4.3 speed with a 210-pound frame and was the fastest running back at the NFL Combine in April. That's the exact kind of skill set you look for in a kick returning. But what is more noteworthy, however, is that the 7th-round rookie, and remember he was the 7th-round pick, has gotten some first-team reps at running back with the Chiefs, though behind both Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon. But here's the key. 7th-round picks are rarely guarantees to make final rosters, and the fact that the Chiefs have already dubbed Pacheco their top return man is an excellent sign he's going to be on the final 53. Moreover, head coach Andy Reid has lauded Pacheco for his juice, and Albert Breer from SI called Pacheco a, quote, name to watch from Chiefs camp on Tuesday. Again, I'm not saying this just to make our guys Ben Kukanis and Scott Barrett happy either. The Rutgers alum Pacheco is a free best ball pick who has bankable skills and is in an excellent offense. This is the kind of talent that makes zero RB drafting appealing to folks. It's also most noteworthy that Pacheco has mostly been working ahead of Ronald Jones, who to me is one of the most overvalued running backs in fantasy drafts at RB 41. I'd rather have all of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, McKinnon, and Pacheco at their current ADPs than Rojo. I really am the opposite of a Rojo truther. A falser? Whatever the case, I'm not drafting him. Now, heading back to Pittsburgh to fill our first wide receiver spot, it's Deontay Johnson. Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of the most plugged-in writers in Pittsburgh, said Johnson and the Steelers are nowhere close on a new contract. And because of the ongoing negotiations, Deontay has been a hold-in at Steelers camp, meaning he's there, but not actively participating. He doesn't want to hurt his earning potential, which seems fair. Johnson almost certainly wants to be paid like his 2019 wide receiver class brethren, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and DK Metcalf, all of whom got new contracts this offseason, and they all got very similar paydays to one another. Now, that's a fair request on Deontay's part, in my opinion. He's got 254 receptions, and they're by far the most of that wide receiver class, 32 ahead of Terry McLaurin. Now, the Steelers do not seem to be willing to match those demands for one reason or another at this point. And the Steelers have been the best team in the NFL at drafting wide receivers for over a decade. And while they have some high-profile misses like Limas Sweed and James Washington, their hits are far more frequent, including in the later rounds. And you have to mention that with Deontay entering a contract here, Pittsburgh spent a 2nd-round pick on George Pickens and a 4th-round pick on Calvin Austin this year, both of whom have been making noise in training camp. So it is possible they are planning for life without Deontay. But meanwhile, NFL Network's Mike Garafolo doesn't necessarily disagree with Dulac's assessment that the two sides aren't close to a new deal. But he throws in the caveat that Garafolo believes a contract will be done ultimately before week 1. Whatever that contract looks like, we don't know. Given everything, Deontay Johnson's ADP is a fair price at wide receiver 22 on Underdog. There's a lot of upside there, but with a new quarterback who might not focus on him as much as Ben Roethlisberger, plus the fact that the Steeler quarterbacks, as I had already mentioned, have been struggling in camp, there's some downside to it. At the other wide receiver spot, it's Hollywood Brown. He's not practicing yet in full because of a hamstring injury, but he's certainly fast. That's because Brown was arrested Wednesday morning in Phoenix on criminal speeding charges, Jose M. Romero of the Arizona Republic reported. Yikes. It has not been a quiet offseason for the Cardinals, and most of it has been bad news. But just one day after Coach Cliff Kingsbury talked about Brown starting to get ramped up for full practices, he gets arrested. Fortunately, and I use that term loosely, speeding isn't likely to be high on the NFL's disciplinary food chain, given what's been going on around the league. And we'll see what happens when we get more details here. Nonetheless, this hasn't been the best start to camp for Hollywood Brown, and I'm wondering if all the bad vibes surrounding the Cardinals will push his 3rd, 4th round kind of cusp ADP down the board. To wrap things up in our flex spot, it's a story we all wish we could stop discussing. I don't want to talk about it. You don't want to hear about it, but we have to talk about it, and it is the Deshaun Watson suspension. Now, the NFL has officially appealed Watson's 6-game suspension handed down by Judge Sue L. Robinson, and to put it briefly, if not 100% accurately, Roger Goodell, the commissioner, has the authority to make the suspension whatever he wants based on the CBA, and it's pretty airtight within the context of the CBA. Now, I'm not going to try to get into all the legal mumbo jumbo. I'm just going to try to sum up what I've been reading. Certainly, Watson's camp and the NFLPA will want to sue and try to get this thing in front of a judge, but even if so, all the Twitter lawyers really don't think this is going to go much of anywhere, and it appears unlikely that Watson can get an injunction to delay the suspension, meaning he's almost certain to miss week 1, even if he can get this in front of a judge. Now, per Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, quote, a court order allowing a player to play while litigation proceeds is not easy to get. The judge looks at various factors, including the likelihood that the player will prevail on the merits of his case. And there is some precedent of players taking the NFL to court and not prevailing. So that could be a factor against Watson. Also, per Florio, quote, the NFL and NFLPA have created a system for imposing and resolving discipline under the personal conduct policy. Barring evidence that the NFL in some significant way deviated from the agreed to terms, the case really should end with the NFL's appeal ruling, end quote. And barring something coming out that we don't know about, it really doesn't look like the NFL deviated from the CBA here. Here's what that means. The basic takeaway, in my opinion, Watson is not only guaranteed to miss games at some point, it's likely to start week 1, and it's likely to be more than 6 games. I'm Joe Dolan. This was the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup. Head to fantasypoints.com and check out our regularly updated news feed with it's fantasy relevant info, okay? I'm not blurbing about the scrubs. It's fantasy relevant info. And I'll see you tomorrow on the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup.